Got a Sony TC 850 reel-to-reel in for calibration and check over and speed setting, etc. Already had the caps on this one changed by the owner, and it was just brought to me to have it all checked out and set the speed, clean controls, etc. Oh, and there is a record problem that we have to deal with. Let's get started. This is the Sony TC 850 reel-to-reel deck. It's been brought in to be checked over and serviced. The owner of it's already done all the capacitors on it. They've changed everything out, but it has some problems as far as record goes, and they want the speeds checked, speed control cleaned, and the alignment done for the heads. So first things first, this one has two separate playback heads. This is a 4-track stereo and a 2-track. It has two separate playback heads. The switch here controls which playback head you're using. It has a 2-channel and a 4-channel, which is basically a half-track and a quarter-track. And the only time you would use the half-track is if you have a tape that was recorded on a half-track machine. You could select the half-track playback head, and what that will do is it will increase the signal-to-noise ratio. Even though a 4-track head will play a 2-track tape just fine, because the tape, or the track recorded on the tape, is wider than the head gap, so it'll play it just fine. But because there's more surface area on a 2-track head, you'll get a little bit of signal to noise ratio. Of course, the same is not true if you play a quarter track tape on a 2-track head. It'll also play, but because there's going to be unrecorded sections of the tape, your signal to noise ratio will actually drop. Anyway, before starting any work on this, let's clean the heads. So in this shot, we'll see the 3 quarter-track heads: erase head here, record head here, and this is the playback head. You notice the size of the gap. And if I pan the camera over to the left, you'll see that there is the 2-track head. And it's just got 2 larger tracks, one on the top side of the tape and one on the bottom, and a big gap in between, because the 2-track tape didn't actually record on the entire width of the tape. Many people think that the 2-track tape recorded the entire half width of the tape, and that's not quite true. It records a track that is wider than a quarter track, but there's also a big gap between the left and the right channel. In this case, there's a big gap in between where there's nothing recorded whatsoever. But it does, because there is a higher contact area, it will improve the signal to noise ratio. You can see it here if we look at the quarter track head here, how narrow the gap is between them, and there's this big space, because on a quarter track, of course, you've got the tape starts up here, you got a gap, a track, a gap, and a track along the edge. On this one here, you've got a track, a gap, and a track, but the tracks themselves are much wider. We can align a 2-track head on a quarter-track tape, providing that there's nothing ever been recorded on the opposite side of the tape, because obviously this will play both sides. If I have a tape that's recorded in both directions, this will play both sides, because there'll be overlap from the other tracks, the other 2 quarter tracks. Anyway, let's clean the heads up on this thing first, and then we'll tackle some of the problems. As you can see, there's a fair bit of debris on here that needs to be cleaned up. Of course, the biggest problem facing all reel-to-reel enthusiasts today is the tapes. The tapes are all very, very old. And I don't even think you can get new tape now. There are still places selling reel-to-reel tape, but a lot of this stuff is stuff that was made 40 years ago and has just been sitting, sitting in storage for all those years. So the biggest problem, of course, with these old tapes is that the binder, which is what holds the iron oxide onto the backing, is starting to fail. So all these old reel-to-reel tapes, every time you play them, they're losing a little bit of their magnetic coating, and you really have to clean your equipment very frequently. That's probably not something that reel-to-reel enthusiasts want to hear, but unfortunately that's the case. I mean, all tape, over time, the binders break down and the oxides come off, but the old obsolete formats such as reel-to-reel, the tapes themselves are really starting to shed their oxide. Some tapes hold out better than others, but it's a phenomenon that affects all tapes. The older they get, the more frequent you're going to have to clean the equipment. And in some cases, just a single playback. I've got some tapes myself that are over 40 years old, some of them over 50 years old, and I can make one pass of that tape and have to clean the heads. So it's a good idea if you've got some really old tapes and you got some material on there that you want to keep, get it off reel-to-reel and get it transferred onto something a little more permanent, because the old vintage tapes are really starting to deteriorate now. So, okay, let's do some tests on this and see what the problem with it is. Well, the first thing you notice on this thing is that the bearings are actually quite loud. Horn works, try the lights.
I shut, wishing I was sleeping in. Don't know how I do it, but somehow.
You hear what happens when I do that, right? Okay, to adjust the heads, I'm going to use the head adjustment screws here to adjust both the 4-track and the 2-track position. We'll use the scope to balance our levels and get our head in phase. So in a perfect world, the two lines are going to line up perfectly. That's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to get the axis identical on both. Within reason. Now there's always going to be a very, very slight variance because no pinch roller is absolutely perfect. As the tape is being pulled through the head, if there's any variation at all in the thickness of the rubber, it's going to cause tension to shift on the tape, which will cause the tape to actually move slightly. So you can get them very, very close. I don't think I'll ever see one that's going to be absolutely perfect. That's just one of the artifacts of analog recording. Any tension differences and so forth, this being a dual capstan design as well. If both pinch rollers are not absolutely perfect, you'll have a slight tension variation between the two, which will cause the head or the tape to shift slightly on the head. So you can get very, very slight phase errors as the tape runs, but the attempt is to get the head as close as possible to playing back as close to a perfect signal as possible. And at this point, it's actually pretty good. Okay, we'll now check the speed. I've got the speed tuning control set to the normal position. This is 4 kilohertz. Let's check the speed out here. That's pretty darn close. Here's our range. Can take it down to 3.8 kilohertz on the low end. 4.26 and then back to the center position. That's pretty darn close to being right on the money. Let's check the 3 3/4 speed. That should show 2 kilohertz. That speed looks almost perfect. Let's try 15. This should go to 8 kilohertz now. A little bit of wow in there, you can hear it. Might be able to tweak that slightly with the internal settings. This unit has other problems though, so I'm just kind of giving it the preliminary right now because apparently it's got a record problem. It's only recording on one channel, so I have to investigate that. But I was just giving this thing it's one over as far as checking it out. Let's check out the record functions on this and see what's wrong with that. The only thing that the 2-track mode is for is if you have a tape that was recorded on a 2-track or a half-track machine. The 2-track mode will give you a little better signal to noise ratio than the 4-track mode. Other than that, it's not really a useful feature because the machine records in 4-track mode. So unless you want to make a recording and turn the tape over and play it backwards, then you can do it with that. But other than that, this feature here is really kind of useless on this machine. It was there to provide compatibility with tapes that were recorded on half-track machine or mono machines where you could flip it into 2-track mode. But the problem with that is if you had a mono machine and you recorded something on one side of the tape and turned the tape over and recorded or played it back on the other side, putting it into 2-channel mode would give you both sides playing back at the same time. So really, it's only useful if you've got a tape that's recorded in half-track mode, which I guess you could see some if you were dealing with some professional tapes coming out of a studio that were recorded on half-track stereo. That would be useful for playing those tapes back at the best fidelity, but they'll still play fine in a 4-track mode. I'm just rewinding this tape so I can make a recording on it because this is my recording tape. So I'm just finding a place on here that I can make a recording and see what's wrong with the recording circuits on this thing. I'm set up to record. I'm going to select my record modes, left and right, and then hit record and hit play and start my music playing. Back now, the complaint was, she said, fix the line inputs left and the right channel problem. Right channel works on both channels, left channel dead. Didn't look like it was dead when I made that recording. Let's just try playing it back and see whether we actually got a recording on both channels. Looks like we didn't get a recording on the right channel at all. In fact, we missed the entire beginning of the recording. Notice that? And then it just kicked in. Because the song's already started. I already reset the counter. We got a big problem with this thing. Let's try some more tests. We'll try arming this for another recording here. That switch is dirty for one. I think it's the record play. I think it's these lockout switches, record mode switches. I think that's the problem. Let's just try a recording here. I'll just start this up. I'm going to play with these switches here while I do this. I think these switches are the problem. Because these are what enable the recording. In playback mode it shows it's recording. Aha! Yeah, that's the problem. It's these switches. If these switches are out, it won't make the recording at all, even though it's in record mode. Yeah, that's the problem. That's the problem. These switches are bad. They're not engaging for record. And it's just luck of the draw which one activates. Right, in this mode it should only record on the left channel, and the right channel should be actually playing back what was already recorded on the tape, and vice versa. In this mode here it should only record on the right channel, which it does. That's the problem, why it's not recording. Got to pull this thing apart and get in there and clean those switches. Here's a look in the bottom of the unit. I can access most of these controls here for cleaning. So I'm going to clean these controls. We'll clean the switches, which are obviously bad because that's what's causing the recording problems. I'm not going to touch any of the adjustments on any of the boards, the record and playback boards, etc. And the only reason I'm not is because these are all paint sealed. So these look like they've never been touched. So since they've still got the factory paint seals on them, I'm going to say that they're probably correct and they don't need to be adjusted. If we remove the face of the unit here, there should be adjustment controls for the 3 separate speed. And here they are, here. For the 3 separate speed adjustments, 38, 19, and 9.5. So there's the 3 adjustments down the side there for adjusting the speed for the detent position. So what I'll do is I'll put my tape back on, and we'll just make sure that the speed. Let's see, I had to take this off in order to get at the control here to clean this one. But we'll make sure that the speed is correct, as close as we can get it. It is very close now, but I might be able to get it just a little bit closer to make it absolutely perfect. Clean the speed control. If I get in here, where the heck is it? I can get in here somehow. There it is. I didn't have to take that off. I thought I had to take that off, but I didn't. So we'll put the knob back on there. Okay, let's thread up the speed test tape again, and I'll verify the speed is correct and calibrate it accordingly. So here we go. We'll set this for 4 kilohertz exactly. That's how slow as it goes. I can go up from there, but that's turned down to the minimum. Go to the next speed down, go to 9.5, which would give me a 2 kilohertz speed. Where is it here? It's this one here. Yeah, that's set exactly, and then we'll go up to the higher speed here. And again, that's turned all the way to minimum. It's pretty darn close. Which someone has labeled incorrectly. Someone's got this one here labeled at 38 and then 19 and then 9.5, which is actually incorrect. 38 is the top speed, 38 centimeters, 15 IPS. So someone's been in here and they've labeled it wrong, but the 19 and 38 settings for 7.5 and 3 and 3 and 15 are actually turned up as high as they can go, or turned down as low as they can go. And it's very, very close, but there's no leeway. I guess I'd have to change the resistor value to give me some more gain on there. Here are the resistors here. Right, these resistors are in series with the control, so I'd have to increase the value slightly because these are already turned to minimum. So for maximum resistance, I'd have to change the value of these if I wanted to increase the range slightly. I have to go up a little bit in value. If I want to increase the adjustment range for the pots here, I'm going to add an extra 1K resistor in series with both of these resistors, and that'll increase my range a little bit. So I'm just going to prep a 1K resistor here. We're going to add it in series with the existing one that's in place. It's almost like this was thought of as an afterthought. When you look at the way it's just tacked on the bottom of the board here. It's like, we'll just give it a little coarse adjustment. So there's one. Now we'll check our speed and see whether I can get this exactly at 8 kilohertz, and then we'll do the same thing for the 7.5 speed. Let's try this. Okay, we'll start it playing. And of course now we see it down at 7.89, so let's just crank this up till we get to 8. And then we'll do the same. I'm just going to rewind the tape here. Where's the play button? There we go. There we go. Exactly on speed. Okay, we'll thread this tape up again and we'll try recording on it this time, a second time, see how it works. These are not my favorite machines to thread. Okay, now that the neighbor had shut off his lawnmower, let's try doing a recording in 15 IPS. And this is playback, right? I'm on the tape. There's my source, and there's my playback. Probably a little bit hot on my levels here. Oh, I know what? I got the playback turned up, that's why. My levels are fine. I just had the playback gain cranked up. When you turn the playback gain up, it affects the meters. a source on one, you'll hear an echo. Because one speaker's playing the source and the other one's playing the playback. And reverse it. Of course, this unit has echo, so if I want to play with that, useless as far as I'm concerned, but tape for one song. We'll disarm the recording switches here, and we'll play it back. This unit has an induction sensor right here that senses the metallic strip. It doesn't do it by contact. It actually has a little coil. So you've got tapes with the metal leader. When the metal leader passes in front of this little coil here, I'll show it to you. It's like the old Betamax units used to use, right? There's a little coil right there. So when the metal leader that this tape has on it, you can see it here, when this metallic strip passes in front of this little coil, it stops it. That's how Sony used to stop their beta machines. Was the VHS camp, of course, used a transparent leader. Sony used a metal leader on beta tapes, and that's how they detected when the tape was at the end. Use the same thing on this one. Hey, it sounds fantastic. This is why they call this the most expensive consumer recording format that you can get, because if you've ever priced out reel-to-reel tape, and if you're doing recordings at 15 IPS, you burn through an awful lot of tape. That tape is just flying. But man, it sounds good. I'm going to close this video off now, as I think this thing's back in running order. The concerns of the owner was the recording. It wasn't working. Left channel dead, she said, but I ran into the right channel being dead initially. That was just caused by these switches being dirty. And we cleaned up all the controls, checked the tape speeds, checked the recording functions, and the heads appear to be properly aligned. I couldn't do much on the 2-track playback head, just because one of the screws itself is actually frozen and I can't adjust it, so I couldn't do much on that, but the other one looks to be fine. Looks to be playing my alignment tape fine, so we'll leave it at that, and we'll say thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one real soon. Bye for now. I got a bunch of old tapes that people have given me, so sometimes whenever I get one of these machines in there, I take the opportunity to listen to one of my old tapes. And that's about all I can play of that. Little Feat. Gotta like it.